Grr. Raw. To keep doing daily videos on YouTube, I need to raise my Patreon and Subscribe Star income to a grand total of $200 a month. So if you're so inclined, help a chap out. Zang. Katanga, my friends. I sometimes get sent games from people who are kind of just starting out in publishing, and I like to be brutally honest in my reviews, and this puts me in a rather uncomfortable position because I don't want to put people off. I mean, don't get me wrong, my first sort of forays into games publishing weren't particularly great, necessarily, at least in terms of self-publishing. But I think the ideas were there, the content was there, it was the presentation that was lacking. And the market was a lot more forgiving back then. So when I do get sent something by an independent creator, that's when I feel some sort of need to be gentle, which I have to kind of work against.
Do you expect mercy? Yeah.
So in this review, I'm going to try and approach it honestly, but in a more sort of constructive criticism way, because there's a lot that's good here, but like my own early self-published work, it's the presentation of that work that is really the problem, I guess. So this game is called Ankur, sort of Land of the Gods, that sort of thing. It's no Swords Fall in that it actually exists and you can play it, and it hasn't been produced by a grifter, but it deals with ancient civilizations and worlds and history, sort of an alternative history centered around Africa and South America, and the author is white. I know it's shocking, but still, like I say, it's no Swords Fall because it actually exists and you can play it, and it seems to be largely coherent, to cover all its bases and to work. My chief criticism of the book overall would be in its presentation. The cover, the characters on the cover, they're a bit stiff and lifeless. It just feels like they've been placed on the cover, not that they're involved in any particular action or anything. And furthermore, the art is off-center with the cover of the book, so that there's white space around it, which perhaps should be occupied for the bleed if it goes to print, and so on. Some of the artwork I think is placeholder stock art. I've nothing against using stock art because I sell stock art, but it just doesn't quite jibe with the setting correctly. Other pieces have been very clearly made specifically for the game, and they're far more fitting and far more illustrative of what the game is about and what's contained within the game. So that's a lot better. The presentation is a simple 2-column layout with paragraphs broken up by a single blank line. The font could probably be better used, and I'm pretty sure I spotted papyrus being used on one of the pages, which is kind of second only to the Microsoft Kids font. So yeah, try and avoid that, and put the main text into something that isn't a default from Word or whatever. Avoid Times New Roman Arial if you have to. That one's at least somewhat modern and readable. Maybe you want to go for an older school font, but yeah, this is all beginner presentation, kind of rookie mistakes, I guess. So what is the game about? So it's put about by a lot of people, mostly UFO conspiracy theorists, but also others, that there were ancient civilizations before the civilizations that we have a record of. And this is almost certainly true to some extent. There have been many environmental disasters and choke points for the human species in the past, so it seems reasonably likely that there were city-states and nations and so on in the past. Not the deep past when we were still living in caves and so on, but still the past that existed that we just don't know about now. Yeah, swallowed up by deserts or floods or whatever else. That's a reasonable assumption, but from that, a lot of people have spun wild and crazy tales where aliens have influenced the past, or ancient civilizations had laser weapons or nuclear weapons, or were much more technologically advanced than we are today, which seems less likely, because I think if we were struck with any of the disasters that afflicted our deep ancestors today, our civilization as a whole might not survive, our population as a whole might not survive, but our technology would allow a core of us to survive and persist. So I don't think that's likely from the past. You've seen this idea riffed on in other games like Exalted. Exalted is meant to be some sort of deep mythical past of the real world. Barsave, Earthdawn, was originally meant to be the backstory to Shadowrun. So Shadowrun would be when the cycle turned around again and magic flooded back into the world, and Barsave was the world before magic disappeared and our Earth appeared. So this game draws a lot on these ideas of this mythological past of ancient astronauts, a lot of von Daniken in there, and Nibiru, genetic engineering and so on. I share a love of this kind of wacky nonsense and a love of mythology, which the author expresses, but I think they have maybe sipped a little too much of the Kool-Aid on this one. It's not a detriment to the game, but it's a little bit unsettling to see that in the introduction. So that's basically what we have here, a pulp-ish, sci-fi-ish, gonzo-ish, myth and magic kitchen sink setting, set in a deep mythical past, heavily influenced by Babylonian mythology in particular, in which you play members of various humanoid subspecies, adventuring, getting entangled in the plots of the aliens, getting entangled in the plots between the various city-states and nations and forces, exploring all of that kind of stuff in an ancient world with ray guns as well as swords and so on. So that's what we're looking at. It doesn't exactly fit into any particular genre, but if you're into games like the Hollow Earth Expedition, Space 1889 perhaps less so, if you're into the whole Sword and Planet genre, then this is kind of that with a pseudo-scientific ancient aliens thing over it. Stargate drew on a lot of the same ideas. So that's what you're looking at. The system is a D12, which you roll against an action potential number, which seems unnecessarily jargony for what is essentially stat plus skill. You roll equal to or lower than that total number on a D12. 1 is always a success, but never a critical success. 12 is always a failure and always a critical failure. If you roll exactly the number you're looking for, that's a critical success. It's nice to see the D12 get a bit of love, but the system lacks granularity. So if you reckon that on a D20, a +1 or -1 is about 5%, on a D12 it's getting on towards 10%, so even small bonuses have quite large effects when you're rolling a D12. It also means it's quite restricted in the way that you can advance your character, because every gradation is so big and so important. +1, -1, whatever the case might be, on a D12 roll is big. I mean, it's simple, and you can ignore a lot of things that might create an influence on the outcome in a lot of games, but I would say a D12 is too small, really, for what's needed here, unfortunately. The rules clearly take a lot of cues from more old school games, but it's not an old school D&D copy. Obviously, you use a D12. Armor reduces damage rather than making you harder to hit. You have stamina, you have wounds. When it comes to character creation, You choose your subspecies is probably the better way to put it, rather than full-on species or saying race, because these are divergent humanoid races. So it's like having Homo sapiens, Homo habilis, and Neanderthals, all as playable races. They're all humans, but they're all subspecies, if you get what I mean. Caste plays the role of your role or class, but obviously by characterizing it as caste, it creates a different feel and a different level of importance to that choice, which can feel a little bit hedging in, but it's not too bad in terms of this game and this background. It makes sense there. You get advantages and disadvantages, so you can have certain bonuses or drawbacks to your character to customize a bit more that way. That's quite nice. And there's a few random tables for things if you run short of inspiration. In terms of the species you can play, there are the Adamu, who are modern humans, the Baalu, who are half men, sort of shaggy Neanderthal types, the Enkidu, told you there was a lot of Babylonian myth influence. These are Yeti-like creatures. They were once used as a worker caste, but they haven't been needed for that so much since telekinetic tools were introduced into the world and so on. So now they kind of don't particularly have a place and are kind of drifting away into the fringes. That they're clearly intended to become Sasquatches and Yetis in the future. There's the Gurma, who are a warrior race, the sort of squat, strong, not exactly dwarves, more like the half-dwarves in Dark Sun, I would say is probably the closest approximation. And there's the Mahdi, who are the ones with the conical heads, who are half-bred with the alien overlord types from Nibiru, and have more psychic potential and so on. And finally, you have a character race with a reason to wear a wizard's hat. The castes available to you include healer, entertainer, soldier, psionicist, scribe, builder, and barbarian. If you take that as caste, it's obviously missing a leader caste and perhaps an outcast. But for player characters, everything's there that you need. Around this basic system, a lot of stuff is built up. There are extensive crafting rules, equipment rules. There are vehicle rules, which are often missing from fantasy clones, but necessary here because there are spaceships and Vimana flying vessels and so on, taken from ancient Indian myth and so on. There's also quite extensive survival rules. The bestiary in the main book is a mix of genetically engineered weirdness and large creatures from our own real past. I was also given a source book on a particular area, but I can't very well review that without giving away a lot. But there is a sort of giant elephant snake hybrid in that, which is surprisingly scary and makes for a very good image. So, looking back over it, what we have here is a very good basic idea with a strong theme and clear appeal to a particular niche of people who are into this type of gaming, which unfortunately is mostly game designers rather than players. There's not a great deal of love for the pulps, but still, it's got a bar against it in that it has its own system, which in this current environment unfortunately turns a lot of people off things. If they have their own system, it may have been better to somehow make it compatible with the systems used in Hollow Earth Expedition, or try and get a license to use the 2D20 system or something like that, or to make it a bland 5e knockoff, which doesn't work so badly for Heroic Adventure. I personally prefer things to have their own systems because then they fit the setting very well. But yeah, that is a knock against it. The presentation isn't there. The artwork, some of it is very good, some of it is very bad. The layout is too simplistic, the font choice is too simplistic. In terms of style then, the potential is there, but I can't really give it more than a 2, unfortunately. In terms of the substance, there are a lot of good ideas in here, but I think the setting needs to be put much more front and center. Like, start the book with a brief introduction of all the key concepts, nicely illustrated, then delve into the character creation and everything else, then the workbook, and then the GM section. That sort of way. The order in which things are in the book needs to be rethought out in terms of presentation, but there is plenty there. This is like an alpha draft. I don't think it's really ready for publication yet, and the author said that they're already working on a revised version of this, so I hope they take some of my comments to heart here. But in the end, you've got to do what pleases you, and if it's what pleases you, then odds are, there's an audience out there for it, of people like you, because you exist, right? Makes some kind of sense. So in terms of substance, it's there. It just needs to be conveyed better, and that is part of the substance mark. So I can't justify giving it more than a 3 maximum in terms of substance, just due to the way that it's presented, laid out, the order that it's presented in. So it is, unfortunately, a 1 for style, 3 for substance. That's 4 out of 10 overall, or 2 out of 5 stars. If the author and their friends can put together a better version, better presentation, sort out the layout problems that exist in this, then I think they've got a half decent little game on their hands with a reasonably unique setting and set of ideas, which will be worth checking into. And it's respectful up to a point of ancient civilizations, except that the whole idea that ancient civilizations had to be influenced by aliens is inherently patronizing. And unfortunately, we don't give our ancestors as much credit as they're due for their cleverness, but it's certainly not racist or anything like that. It's more like the kind of revised view of the pulps you might have seen in Warren Ellis's series, particularly the section of Planetary with Opaque Ray and Lord Blackstock and so on. So, worth a look. And again, unlike Swordsfall, it exists. Zang. Postmortem Studios, role-playing games, and a lot more to die for. Post-mort.com